Thank you, everyone. The Communications and Leadership Award is the highest honor awarded to a non-Toastmaster. The award embodies the two tenets of Toastmasters, communications and leadership. Nominees have made a significant contribution within the district boundaries as communicators embodying the values of strong leadership. Nominations are submitted by active members of District 3 Toastmasters, and then they're reviewed by a committee of past district leaders and current district leaders and presented at this lunch, the Hall of Fame luncheon, annually.
This year's recipient has an awesome bio. This year's recipient joined Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona as the Vice President and Chief Community Relations Officer in January 2024, bringing with him the experience of a distinguished career in public service. Prior to joining AZ Blue, the recipient was elected the 37th Sheriff of Maricopa County. As sheriff, he led the largest sheriff's office in the U.S. from 2017 to 2024, responsible for over 9,000 square miles and one of the largest jail systems in the country. His accomplishments include instituting more comprehensive drug recovery programs for inmates, creating a health and wellness division for the sheriff's office employees, and establishing boards to ensure diversity, equality, and inclusion within the organization. The recipient's tenure as sheriff was the conclusion of nearly 30 years of service in law enforcement. 1988-2009. He was the director of the Silent Witness Program. He established a multilingual tip line and revamped community outreach efforts, all designed to facilitate critical crime-related information with the goal of cases throughout Maricopa County. Under his supervision, Silent Witness played an integral role in solving 2 serial killer investigations, for which the recipient was recognized by Crime Stoppers International as the program coordinator for the year 2009. Woven within an exemplary career in public safety, this year's recipient's service to nonprofit organizations, he has been an executive leader to both Child Help and My Kid, overseeing prevention programs and governmental affairs. Throughout his professional career and in his personal life, the recipient has worked to protect, support, and provide services in the promotion of health, safety, and wellness for children and young adults. The recipient studied criminal justice at Glendale Community College and Northern Arizona University. He also graduated from the esteemed Federal Bureau of Investigation's National Executive Institute, a development program offered to only a select few national and enforcement leaders each year. Please stand and help me welcome this year's recipient of the Leadership and Communication Award, Paul Penzone.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, okay. Okay. First of all, thank you so much for this honor. It's very humbling anytime you get a chance to be recognized, because I will be the first to tell you that when you have this privilege of being in leadership, it is the men and women in the organization that do the work, and your job is just to be sure to represent them with the dignity and respect that they deserve for the work they've done. So it really is more so a reflection of the privilege and the opportunities I've had. I like the James Bond theme, but I will tell you I've been a James Bond fan for a long time, but I kind of binge watched it knowing I was going to be here with you today. And I am concerned because I'm not sure if he killed more bad guys or he's responsible more so for the deaths of women that he was in a relationship with. So it was a little bit unsettling for me. I do want to take a moment, though. You know, I actually started out when I was in high school and worked in the banquet space. So would you be kind enough to thank those who have been serving you food today and preparing it for you? So I want to start off, my voice just got louder quickly. I want to begin by just expressing what a privilege this is. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir that you understand, but anytime you are given the opportunity to speak to others, there's nothing more precious in our lifetime than the time that we spend. It's finite, and once we use that time, we lose that time. So when you give someone a privilege to share some thoughts with you, it is your time that matters most. And my hope today is that you feel that it was worthwhile, and that you, in this recognition, that you don't have any regrets for your choice, because I truly am honored. I want to take you back, though, if you're unfamiliar with Silent Witness, it was a program designed to solicit tips for cold cases throughout the county, not just for Phoenix Police Department. And when I first went to Silent Witness, I'd come from working undercover narcotics, so I really was an investigator by trade, and I wasn't really clear on what the role or responsibilities would be. Historically, I hadn't been much of a public speaker. I was an investigator and did police work, but I hadn't really been thrust into the space where I was speaking to the media, to the community in that context. But I remember definitively the experience that I had that helped me to understand the importance of how you choose your words. And it will be a little bit heavy, so please forgive me. But when I went to Silent Witness, I had a case where I met with a mother whose daughter had been murdered. And it was an unsolved case. And to be quite frank, unfortunately, in law enforcement, oftentimes those who are victims of violent crimes are people who have been involved in bad decisions and criminal behavior themselves. It's far less common for a law-abiding citizen to fall to the victim of a violent crime. So I go there, and I know the history of this young lady, and it was not stellar with her choices. But then I sat down with her mother, and her mother started to talk about her as a person, not the case itself, but just as a person. And she broke out the photo album and shared pictures with me and talked about who this young lady was to her, the apple of her eye, the experiences that she had. She, whether she was in sports or performing music or in a beauty contest, it was just her life story. And what went through my head at that time was, I'm very much a man of faith. It was there, but for the grace of God, go on. What if I were on the other side of this table and it was my loved one who was lost? What would my expectation be of law enforcement? And the reason I want to share that is because the context for me now, partially and importantly, was to talk to the community through the media and try to solicit tips so that we could hold this person responsible who had taken the life of a beautiful, precious child. I say a child, she was an adult, but to this mom, she was her child. And although that was the big part of my responsibility, I knew that my words mattered because I was going to be speaking to an audience of one. That when I went in front of the media and talked about this case that was now a cold case, it was a few years old, that there might be someone in the community that had information and that my words could compel them to do the right thing, to provide information, to hold someone accountable, to prosecute the person responsible. But if that wasn't going to happen, for that mother, however I expressed and what words I chose to reflect who her daughter was to her, was the most important thing that I would be doing. Because I had to make sure that that mother knew that her daughter was respected, that I gave her dignity, that the word that I selected showed that law enforcement would stay by her side regardless of where this case went, and that people cared about her and therefore cared about her daughter. So I express that because I do believe firmly that words matter, especially in a time when we see leaders choosing words that are more about propelling their own self versus bringing people together and unifying, or doing it in a selfless fashion where when you're given a privilege of leadership, it's about how you serve others. So through unique circumstances, I was fortunate enough to be elected sheriff. And when I was elected sheriff, I knew definitively that I had two substantial responsibilities. The first is, you are the gatekeeper of all that is the oath of office. The mission itself, the integrity of the office, all those elements, it is your job to set a standard through your words and your actions to ensure that the men and women of the organization reach and exceed that standard, because you have empowered them with incredible privilege. Every day people in law enforcement go out there and I say, what's the most powerful thing that we do? And oftentimes people think about the use of deadly force, which is significant in some other aspects, but ultimately in a free nation, the most important and powerful thing that you can empower someone to do is to take the freedom of another. Whether it's short-term or long-term, law enforcement officials every day make decisions that will incarcerate short-term or long-term individuals based off of their investigation and their testimony, their words. So as the sheriff, I had to make sure that my agency, the men and women who represented our power, were respectful of you, respectful of that authority. The other aspect of my job that I felt was really important is this right here, that when I spoke as the sheriff, it wasn't about Paul Penzone ever. It was about the men and women who did the job and making sure that they were recognized for their sacrifice. Because unequivocally, it is unlike, aside from maybe military, it is unlike any other profession. That you'll go to work every day, not knowing if you'll come home. That your family may not see you the next day because you're willing to run towards gunfire when others are running away. And I know that sounds really dramatic, but that is the reality. While I was a Phoenix police officer, there were 21 officers that were killed in the line of duty. And when you become the head of a law enforcement agency, the heaviest yet most important day that you'll ever have is when you have to give a flag to a family member whose loved one died in the line of duty. Because you have to ensure that that moment that they are respected, and your words, although may be brief to that individual, have to be impactful. So I'll walk you through more exercises and then I'll close. And I say exercise, I'm a storyteller by trade, I think. You know, when I learned to be an investigator, I had to tell the story of what had occurred. And this is a really difficult one. During my tenure as sheriff, I believe that we lost 15 employees, 4 to violence from perpetrators, the other 11 because of COVID illness. And I remember, you know, more vividly the 4 that were the significant violent related ones. Not that I didn't know the other employees and I care very deeply about them. This one was by far beyond anything I'd ever imagined I would be dealing with. But this is another reflection of why our words matter so much. We had a deputy who had a person in custody, and as he was trying to put him, he was out of the district, as he was trying to place him into a holding cell, he was by himself at the time. He'd asked for backup to come support him, but it was so busy that day, backup couldn't get there to help him. So he's trying to put this inmate into a holding cell, and he's taking his handcuffs off, and the inmate is being uncooperative. And ultimately, the inmate turns on him, and without getting into the details of how, he assaulted the deputy so severely that he was on life support by the time I arrived. So that was within a very short time frame. He was assaulted so severely, just a physical assault, that he was fighting for his life. And the bad guy had stolen the keys, taken the deputy's gun, and taken his car and fled. So now we have a manhunt of a very dangerous individual. And when we talk in this circumstance, I know there are times that we give speeches and there's somewhat controlled environments, but there's also times as leaders that it is a very evolving moment. And you have to be as instinctual and have discernment as much as you have to be prepared on what you may need to say. So in that moment, I have police agencies from all around the county who are sending their SWAT teams to assist us with a manhunt. And we know the person is extremely dangerous, but this is a colleague. This isn't a foreign entity. This is a person that they know, and they understand that he's fighting for his life. So when you've been in a situation where someone's died in the line of duty in law enforcement, it's almost as though the earth stops spinning. The air becomes very heavy. You know, it's almost as though there's a quietness that's really unsettling. And as a leader, you have to do a couple things in that moment. You have to recognize there's a job to do, which is to catch a bad guy who may harm someone else. You also have to care for your employees who are now devastated because of the loss of a colleague. But in caring for them, you have to summon them the strength to get the job done so that no one else is harmed. And it is a balancing act. So I knew in that moment, and I'm not sharing this as a reflection of me, I'm sharing this as a reflection of leadership. So please bear with me. I knew in that moment that it was going to require something that is very unorthodox for me because I'm very conscientious of my words. So I called my wife first because she really is, I would tell you, my muse. And I said, listen, I'm going to go on the news and I'm going to say something I would never say otherwise. But due to the circumstances, it is the most important thing that I can say. So I went on the news conference and I talked about our deputy who was on life support. And I talked about, you know, every day he goes to work and he puts a uniform on to keep this community safe. He will put himself in harm's way so that your children can be safe. And now he's fighting for his life. And he's fighting for his life. And here's where I said it was unorthodox. I said, and I use the words, forgive me, because I know there's a young lady in here. I called him, well, let's just say that I used some profanity when I referred to him. POS would have been the initials. And I'm not endorsing that as a practice. But unequivocally, it was one of the few times that I chose my words before I spoke because I had to have an impact. And the reason I had to choose those words was because I'll tell you, I was speaking to an audience of one. Like when I was speaking to a mother who lost her daughter. It was every one of the police officials that were there. I needed to pop the air that day so that everything would change, that the earth would continue to spin again, that they understood their mission, that they felt that the leader in that moment cared so passionately that what they were about to do and what they would probably encounter was not only necessary, but it was a responsibility. And I could see, because they were all standing there at the news conference, how quickly the energy changed for them and how they knew what task at hand was. Now, I would tell you that later that evening, what happened is that same bad guy tried to rob someone, and it was a community member that actually used gunfire to stop him, and our deputies arrested him. But what I learned in that moment, that there are peaks and valleys in leadership, and there are peaks and valleys when we speak to issues. And what I mean by peaks and valleys is we're in the valley and things seem calm and they're stable, and we speak to something and we can speak with context and we can speak with control. Then there are other times when you're in that really difficult, in the face of the storm, and you have to choose your words differently. And you can't use them both all the time, because one moment would call for something that another does not. And in that moment, there was a change in the attitude of the men and women in doing the job in a context that ensured that they were going to be safe and they were going to keep our community safe, because they understood the purpose. And I think that's one of the most difficult things that you can do in law enforcement. Now, I would tell you that 3 days later, I had to go do what I just described earlier, which was hand a flag to a mother whose adult son was murdered in the line of duty. And my words in that moment were far briefer, because it wasn't so much about the quality of the length of what I said. It was ensuring that less is more, and that she understood how important it was that her son's legacy would not be in vain, that this agency would stand by her side and her family's side from that day forward. I would tell you there's no more difficult day, but no greater privilege with that burden. Because if you want to be a leader in the capacity of law enforcement, you have to understand the peaks and valleys. And they're never about you. They were about the men and women who were doing the job that day. They were about Deputy Ruiz, who sacrificed his life that day. They were about Deputy Ruiz's mother, who would never see her son again. But they were also about the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, because representing professionalism, I know it sounds probably hypocritical because of the words that I chose, but representing a dedication to service and professionalism is what gives all of us a sense that when you go out into the community, that things are going to be okay, because there are people that will put a uniform on and do the job the right way, with conviction, with respect, and with ethics and integrity. And that takes me back to the beginning, which is leadership. I have been the beneficiary of circumstances that have thrust me into places of leadership, and I am extremely grateful for it. And I hope that I served it well from the context that representing others, making it about the needs of you, should always be the priority. Is that the cue that I have to go? And I think what you do is so critically important, because leadership, I can give you the extreme of law enforcement and talk about the significance of the difficulties of the job. But every single person is a leader in the moment that you exist, with the people that you interact with, and the opportunity that you have, if you're just willing to recognize that it's presented itself. And the idea that you practice in a trade, in a profession, and in a group to ensure that you choose your words correctly, that you are inspirational, that you're respectful, that you are about bringing people together and not dividing, that you're about creating opportunities so that others may thrive. There's only one way that our world gets better, and it's by the things that you're investing in and what you're practicing. Because although nonverbal communication may be more significant, verbal communication is extremely impactful. And if we don't choose our words wisely, we're teaching the next generation that recklessness and irresponsibility and disrespect is acceptable. And that would be the greatest flaw, biggest mistake that we can make, because we owe it to them to teach them the way to choose their words wisely, to understand the impact that they have on others. One of my favorite sayings, Maya Angelou, is, people won't always remember what you said or what you did, remember how you made them feel. You make them feel a certain way because of the words that you choose. So I'd just like to close with this, again, with gratitude. But I would always, when I had a graduating class at the Sheriff's Office, I always expressed the same statement to conclude it, and it was this: we spend a lot of time figuring out what we want to do for a living when we're growing up. And even when we're grown, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do for a living. But the most important decision that we make is who you want to be for a lifetime. And who you want to be for a lifetime is reflected on how you choose your words when you interact with everyone and anyone in any given opportunity, because you will leave them an impression of who you are as a person. And that respect is a gift that you give, not one that you receive. Words are food in some ways. I'm Italian by descent, and if you come to my home, my wife cooks, I assure you if there's 10 people, she's cooked for 30. And if those 10 people are all Italian, when they leave, we have food for 50 for some reason. If you're going to be invited to the table to be nourished, words are nourishment. Make sure that you are feeding as much as you're being fed. And I know that's what you believe in, so that's why I'm so honored to be here with you today. So thank you so much for this privilege, for this recognition. And again, it's really just because of the foundation I've been able to stand on that others built for me. Thank you for what you're doing to just better yourself and by extension then better others. And I guess that's the best part about when you're a public speaker is to know when to say it's time to stop talking. And I just want to say Godspeed and thank you.